Hello, my name is Daniel Stillwell and I'm the editor of the IFTA e-newsletter. We are here in Aberdeen, Scotland at the IFTA Congress 2025 and we have with us Nathan Fetter, recent doctor.
Yeah, hi.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
So welcome to Scotland, welcome to IFTA. You are here not just to enjoy the sights and people, but also to present. So tell us a little bit about your presentation.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I am going to be talking about therapist perceptions of arranged marriages, what they know, what they don't know, and I'm going to also be talking about how we can also provide therapy, competent therapy for diverse populations, especially those who are in arranged marriages. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So probably what is helpful, since we have an international audience, what is an arranged marriage?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because that's almost like $1 million question.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know what an arranged marriage is, and now, 2025, it takes so many different forms. And an interesting piece of that is there's very little research on arranged marriages, generally speaking, but there's many different forms. Like, different countries will have multiple different types of arranged marriages and how they exist usually, but the way I define it for my research purposes is a couple being introduced by a third party, and that's vague enough to encompass most forms of arranged marriages and sweet, short, to the point.
Okay. When I think about arranged marriage, from the limited experience I have working with that, I think about the setup or the introduction having a power dynamic as well. Is that part of what you were looking at?
It's so interesting that you say that, because I spoke with 8 different participants, right? Different therapists, all MFTs, right? And it was interesting because almost every single one of them assumed that there would be a power dynamic or oppression or lack of autonomy in the process and potentially throughout the marriage, right? But that's not necessarily the case. A lot of people choose to, most of the cases of arranged marriages, they tend to choose to be part of an arranged marriage. There's a reason why they choose their arranged marriage route.
Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah, okay. They choose for religious reasons, or whether it's for, they usually want to continue some form of value system, whatever that value system might be, within the marriage and within the family. Like, for example, back in the 1400s, right, there were arranged marriages all the time. There were kings and queens and royalty and of all different forms which arranged their marriage, and there was a lot of them were against wills, and a lot of them started wars, right? And lots of people, or the lack or not going with their arrangement has started wars. Lots of different history pieces. That doesn't happen as much now, which is kind of nice, but yeah, there's a lot of different pieces to that.
When you think about an arranged, or when I think about an arranged marriage, part of the power dynamic that I think about is a parent or a caregiver or a grandparent or someone with authority. So maybe that's what I mean by power. Someone with an authority saying, this is what I think is the best for you, and if you do not comply, there will be consequences.
That is so, yeah. There's a lot of fear of consequences, and in India, right, right now it's still a pretty common form of marriage, having an arranged marriage. And one of the participants was from India, and she talks about how she had to escape and run away from her family, and specifically her grandparents. And she used to consider her grandparents to be like a dictator, Hitler. That was the specific person she chose, as a child. And then she ran away to the U.S. and blamed the lack of arrangement on, I don't remember what she said specifically, and ran for the U.S. and she's now MFT here, very successful MFT as well. So yeah, there's a lot of that. You also see in places in the Middle East where there's different forms and different practices that a lot of therapists might consider to be non-autonomous. Specifically, have you heard of bride kidnapping?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and a lot of don't realize that that's actually just a ritual,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not that necessarily that no one's being kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
It's an act of being kidnapped, and it's for religious reasons as well. And imagine therapists coming in. Imagine a therapist having a client who say they're in arranged marriage, and the therapist assuming that the wife has been kidnapped into this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What that does to the therapeutic alliance.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just the fear-based questioning that may come out of that. Especially if it's something like, I was married at 17. Well, in the States, we have different laws around minors getting married versus people 18 or older. So that would, you add something like kidnapping or loss of autonomy or sexual submission or other things that may be part of that. Yeah, a therapist may come in with a lot of preconceived ideas that may or may not be right.
Right, and that brings up, like, there's also arranged marriages that are before the age of 18,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in those countries, there aren't necessarily consent laws. Maybe there are, but I don't know how those work at below 18, right? It's very dangerous thing to think about, and having those preconceived notions, like you were saying, would be really hard.
Well, then, since most people watching this are going to be clinical in nature, what would you tell a clinician in a country X to start with in terms of making sure that those assumptions don't hurt the therapeutic process?
If they're in the country?
If whatever country they are from, because we're not only speaking India or U.S. or Scotland or anywhere else.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Well, that's interesting perspective, giving it the international part of it. Well, I would say that, right now what we have to lean on is cultural humility.
Okay.
Right? We have to be humble and I think it was 6 out of 8 of the therapists I interviewed, they said, we have to be culturally humble and affirming of whatever their cultural beliefs are. And it's funny, it's funny because a good amount of the therapists that I interviewed, they said something along the lines of, I don't have a bias. I think I can be neutral. I'm very neutral. That was the word. Right?
Very neutral.
I'm very neutral, right? It sounds a little like silly. And then right after they're like, oh, but they're all oppressed, and they're all, none of it's autonomous. That's not very neutral to me. But yeah, why did so going back to what you were asking though, right? It's really important to be culturally humble, to learn from the people walking into the therapy room, to learn what it's like, while not assuming that there was no autonomy, that there was no choice involved. Yeah.
Would there be times where we would want to be more advocate oriented with people who maybe are not feeling that maybe they do feel a sense of voicelessness?
Sense of voicelessness
in their own marriage, in their own decision making. Or would there be a time where we would want to help build assertiveness or self-efficacy within a marriage if things aren't healthy and functional?
I guess it would depend if it's culturally attuned to the clients coming in.
Okay.
Right? It would, going back to that cultural humility piece, we'd have to also, another piece of it is that there's no literature on this. Very little research on whether or not, like, how to handle an arranged marriage in therapy. If any at all, I didn't find any research on it, and that speaks to the need to service these folks, especially, now the recent elections have kind of turned things backwards everywhere, but upside down. But generally speaking, India is one of the top countries in terms of immigration to the U.S. That's one of the most people who are coming into the U.S. They're from India, and a lot of them practice arranged marriages, right? And there's no real infrastructure here when it comes to therapy. When it comes to, well, now there's more communities, but there's no real infrastructure in terms of therapy. What works, and what doesn't work for arranged marriages. So we'll have to let the research speak and get that done as well.
Okay. since this is something you have done some research, what would some of the next steps be? Where would you encourage people to look or to do their own work?
Well, some of the participants mentioned creating a database of all the different cultural humility parts of therapy that needs to be addressed by therapists, which is an interesting idea, to get to know the different forms of arranged marriages in our specific case. But we'll keep an eye out for the database if it does come up. I mean, we'll see see where the future leads us, right? And supervision, preferably from someone who knows about that community.
Okay, all right. So continue to expose yourself to new ideas, seek consultation, and check your assumptions.
Check your assumptions. Yeah, that's a really big, like, person of therapist kind of thing. Yeah, being aware and not pretending that we're all neutral, right? Like, in some cases, we can have a neutral stance, but oftentimes, if we dig deeper, there's some lack of neutrality.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dr. Vetter, Nathan, thank you so much for being here. Last question, you're here in Scotland. Have you gotten a chance to do anything fun?
In Scotland? No, but hopefully tomorrow after the conference I will. So I'm looking forward to, I really wanted to see the Northern Lights.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get there, or if they'll show.
Yes. Not always available, especially in cloudy days like today.
Right, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.